Hello and welcome back to the Americano Show. I am delighted to be joined today by one of my favorite Spectator contributors. I think I can probably now reveal that he often contributed anonymously as Coburn, our muckraking anonymous contributor, but a few years ago. But you have actually contributed on your own name to the Spectator, and I'm delighted to get you on Americano because, well, today we want to talk about property taxes. Because Blake, you are a producer on the Charlie Kirk Show, which obviously until recently was hosted by the late, much lamented Charlie Kirk. And you've gotten yourself in a little bit of hot water with the audience, I believe, by saying that you oppose the abolition or elimination of property taxes, which is something that Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, is proposing to do. Americans, particularly American conservatives, don't like taxes. They're anathema to the spirit of America. And yet you find yourself supporting them in this case. Explain yourself.
All right. Well, first off, thank you for having me on, Freddie. And I love contributing to the Spectator as much as you love having me. So it's been a great relationship. You are correct. The response, we get emails into our show as we love to say, we read all of them. We get a lot of emails, and this one really riled people up. People really care about their homes in America, so we got a lot of emails about the 50-year mortgage idea from the Trump administration a couple weeks ago, and now we're getting a similar amount of energy on this property tax discussion. And yeah, it's very, I'll be honest, it's very hostile to my point of view and quite in favor of Governor DeSantis's. But I do think that's going to be a mistake if the Republican Party goes down that tack. And obviously, it's not that I love taxes. I greatly dislike taxes, as all true Americans do. But to the extent we're going to have taxes, there are different types of taxes we can do. And my point of view is it's better to have property taxes than to have income taxes, than to have or higher income taxes rather, or to have far higher sales taxes, or a lot of other things that would end up being raised to offset the loss of property tax income for a few reasons. First, I think the evidence is pretty strong that the distortionary effects on the economy from property taxes are less than other options. And also, and this is really what riled people up, is Governor DeSantis and others have explicitly framed abolishing property taxes as a way to lower the tax burden of older Americans. And what I've pointed out is the people in America who are struggling the most, and people that, my predecessor, my old boss, Charlie, he would always talk about this. It's younger Americans who are struggling the most. Younger Americans are struggling to establish families, struggling to buy homes, struggling to amass savings, do a whole bunch of things. And it's not that every single young person is doing bad or every old person in America is doing great. Far from it. But when we're making policy, we need to look at the overall trends, the overall situation. And what the overall averages tell us is older Americans have higher net worths. They have already other tax breaks that go in their favor. They are recipients of Social Security and Medicare, which there's no comparable program for young people, of course. And I think it would be disastrous when we already have so many problems for young people to intensify this by abolishing a tax that, basically because it's one still paid by some elderly Americans. And it's going to inevitably be offset by raising taxes on younger people, because no one, as far as I know, is making a serious proposal to pay for this tax by just abolishing a bunch of the programs that it funds. It's just going to have to be paid for in some other way. I was reading an article the other day that estimated if Texas fully abolished its property tax, they would need a sales tax of about 20%. And I don't think anyone's eager to pay a 20% sales tax. And on top of that, that's clearly something that attacks young people who need to be spending more because they might have kids, because they're they're buying things in their life for the first place, while lowering the property tax or lowering the tax burden for older Americans who have generally bought more of the things that they already need in their lives.
Well, yes, I wouldn't advise anyone comes to Britain where we pay property taxes, very high sales taxes, and very high income taxes too. But that's for another discussion. I think what's very interesting about this subject to me is that it cuts to the heart of something big going on in conservatism at the moment, and this is something that Charlie Kirk talked about a lot, which is young people feeling they don't have a stake in a kind of property owning democracy. And the Trump administration did partly get elected by a drift of Gen Z people, particularly Gen Z males. This has been talked a lot about, towards Trump, and a sort of hope that he might give them a future. And this, what I've seen called boomer populist idea of just appealing to old people because they vote in very large numbers, by promising to scrap property taxes, is very off-putting to those young people who might be going towards conservatism or going towards the Republican Party or the MAGA movement.
Yeah, and yeah, I saw the same. I think I saw the same article you're referring to by my friend Scott Greer, and yeah, he refers to it as boomer populism, and it's the thing that might be a little worrisome is I think that there's excellent potential for it to be politically successful, at least in the short term, because it is true. America has an inverted population pyramid. We have more older people than younger people. The median age keeps going up, and those people are also more politically engaged. And so I think it's quite possible these sorts of ideas will pass. I think it's even possible these ideas will get rewarded, at least in the short term, at the ballot box. But I think it would be harmful to America long term and probably harmful to conservatives long term, because if you alienate all young people by sending a signal that your priority is just current old people, then 20 years from now, most of those older voters that you were relying on will no longer be with us, and you'll have middle-aged former young voters who are very angry that they still don't have that stake in the American system, and they'll be inclined to blame a party that overtly said it was going to focus on improving things for those oldest Americans. And on top of that, on top of any political implications, I just genuinely believe this is going to be a harmful policy. And this is a difficult one to explain because no one likes paying taxes. No one wants to be here that cutting a certain tax burden is going to be harmful. But if you look at individual states, you can see the sort of toxic spirals that a no property tax regime or a low property tax regime can cause. In Hawaii has among the lowest property taxes in the United States. And does that mean it is a paradise of affordability for families? No, it's actually the opposite. I believe it has the most expensive homes in the United States. It's heavily bought up by a handful of billionaires. I think 10% of all private land in Hawaii is owned by 38 people. Larry Ellison owns most of an entire island. Not necessarily caused by that, but it's definitely symbolic of the overall issue. A more famous example is California. California famously passed Prop 13 about 50 years ago, actually. And what it did, I don't want to get too deep into it for the British, but it essentially froze property taxes for people as they were in 1976, and also capped how quickly they could raise from that point, and other benefits that basically mean new people buying homes in California will pay far, far, far higher property taxes than people who've been living in the same home for decades. And through various ways, you can will or inherit those property taxes, within your family. And so you get wildly different amounts of property tax in California. People on the same block with houses of the same value, some people will be paying $800 of property tax a year, and some people will be paying $8,000 of property tax. And I think Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, he's talked about paying, I think, $10,000 of property tax on his home in Omaha, which is worth about $500,000. It's actually a quite humble house. and then paying lower property taxes on his much more expensive property in California. And the final result of this, the upshot of all of this, is California is right behind Hawaii for among the most expensive homes in the United States. It's actually a horrible state for the middle class, for younger people. It has incredibly high taxes on everything else because of this property tax regime. It incentivizes behavior like just squatting on a home, not because it's the best place ideally for you to live, but because you just never want to give up the incredibly favorable tax treatment that is enshrined in California. And so what people do is they have been moving, most notably to Texas, a state with higher property taxes, actually among the highest in the US, but they have lower other taxes. Overall, their houses are less expensive. And it's those second order effects. Having higher property taxes, there's evidence that it lowers home prices overall. And there's ways to make it better. I think we'd be stronger if we actually went for specifically a land tax so that you incentivize building on land and using land rather than just speculating on it. But it's very difficult to explain these things. It really is kind of just saying, they're saying, I want to give you candy, and you're saying, no, you should not have the candy at times.
Well, that's absolutely extraordinary about California, because I mean, that seems to be a tax policy that is designed to make the housing market terrible for everyone.
It really is. I'm looking at a specific map here that was someone sent me, and there literally is, on a block, there is an $806 property tax on a house, and then right next door to it, there is one for $27,000, and they are a different valuation. So actually, I'll look at two that are about the same valuation: $800 versus $17,000. Same, literally adjacent lots.
Amazing. Well, I suppose what I mean, often people have talked about in the last 20 years about younger generations being coddled, spoiled, overindulged, having too easy a life. I suppose what we're seeing really, though, from American government is a sort of coddling of old people, because old people do get entitlements, and it costs the American government an enormous amount to pay for this. And yet they also are the recipients of the best tax breaks, again, because they seem to vote in larger numbers.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a vicious cycle, because what you have is you have a democracy where everyone's able to vote, but there are more older people and they vote in higher numbers. And so there is a lot of political incentive to cater to them. In some ways, it's easier because it's a less long-term promise than making fresh promises to a 20-year-old. And so the incentive is to weight the benefits of the society towards those elderly voters, which in some ways seems to probably lower the birth rate, damage American young people, which will mean there's fewer young people and more of them are checking out. And then the incentive intensifies. And I think it's very worrisome. And I think we see the same problems playing out in other Western countries. I know in like countries like France and Spain, the expense of pensions has grown wildly while young people remain chronically underemployed. Paying for those pensions is often a justification for the extremely high levels of migration that Europe's continued to have. Just the other day on our show, I was using the UK as an example, because I know you guys have your infamous triple lock pension, where it is categorically an iron law of the universe that British pensions will become unaffordable because they are guaranteed to grow faster than wages. They are guaranteed to grow faster than inflation over the long haul. And in theory, that will eventually mean they're higher than the entire GDP of the United Kingdom. And yet it's also politically untouchable. And it's very bothersome if you're getting policies that are politically untouchable that are also truly, in the long run, financially suicidal. And I'm worried that creating a new entitlement of you can never have property taxes on the right, and suddenly we'll get no property tax regimes will be the thing in every red state, which is really what Governor DeSantis is advocating for. It's what other Republicans are advocating for. I think it could have the potential to greatly mess up what has been a victory for the American right, which is their states have been so much more affordable and so much more livable than blue states. It is a big triumph that all of the internal migration in the United States is out of California, out of New York, out of Illinois, and going to Florida, to Texas, to Tennessee, to these other states. And I'm worried that they could mess it up for what is, I'll be honest, like a little bit of a new kind of populist fad. And there are other things they could do that I think would be winning, but this one it's so powerful to say, I'm going to abolish this tax that you hate paying every year, that I think it could succeed.
Yes. Well, I could see it, as you say, it would work in the short term electorally. But lastly, Blake, because I know you've got to get on, but I wanted to ask about entitlements and Trump. I mean, Trump has succeeded politically to a large extent because he was trusted to protect entitlements by voters who benefit from them. Unless some American government at some stage, you're not as far down the terrible fiscal rabbit hole that we're down here in Britain, but entitlements will overwhelm the American economy, and at some stage, some government is going to have to take that very difficult and painful decision. And yet, there doesn't seem to be a democratic mechanism for doing so because it is so detested whenever anyone tries to touch them. And this has been a kind of Republican talking point for a long time, but it's true.
No, it's terrifying. It's because you are correct. It is basically untouchable, and part of the success of Trump's electoral strategy was just overtly saying, "I'm not going to touch any of the things, any of the popular entitlements. In fact, I will make them greater." We passed in the big beautiful bill. It included a new senior tax break whose intent was basically it was to make Social Security income tax-free if that's all of what you're living on in America. So that's effectively slightly increasing what that benefit is. And in the long run, it is true, these things cannot live without some kind of reform. Now, it's not an apocalyptic abolish Social Security, but it might be you might have to uncap the payroll tax. It might be you have to raise the retirement age. It might be you have to, in some manner, cut benefits. That will likely eventually happen in the United States, but it's tough. It is super politically radioactive. So what we also saw in this government shutdown is the entire government shutdown revolved around the continuation of certain Obamacare-related subsidies for buying health insurance in America. And what was pointed out is those subsidies only came into existence during the COVID lockdowns, because as an additional support, basically an additional stimulus, an additional way to help people during COVID. It was a temporary benefit that is now a popular, effectively permanent benefit that people don't want to they can't tolerate getting rid of it. It's hugely politically radioactive. Any new benefit, any new entitlement becomes extremely popular. People get hooked on it. They get, for lack of a better word, they feel entitled to it. And so I think it would be very risky long-term for Republicans to go and create what is in essence a new entitlement that you shall never have to pay property taxes, because you're running out of, it's bad enough trying to pay for all our current entitlements. We should not create a new one of that sort. And what I also worry they'll do is if they can't make the math work on fully abolishing property tax, what they'll end up doing is, I worry, they'll try a King Solomon-like solution and go halfway, where they might say, only the elderly, will make them all totally exempt from property tax. And that's how you get the California situation. You have a special select group of people that is paying very low or no property tax, and they compensate by hiking taxes on another group. And I've received a lot of emails from our listeners and viewers who say, don't engage in generational warfare. And I've replied to some of them, and I say, I don't believe I am. I believe I am opposing an effort to engage in generational warfare, because I think people are proposing a new tax break specifically to help one group of people, older Americans, when it's the exact opposite of the group of Americans that is the most in trouble, the most that feels the most alienated from the American system, and that is also the most alienated from conservative politics. And if we continue down that path, you're going to intensify that generational schism, and it's going to be disastrous. Charlie liked to talk in the months before he died. He talked about Mamdaniism versus MAGA. That's how he liked to formulate it. That if you can't have a reform of America, a conservative leaning reform of the American system that gives young people a stake, that gives young people a new path towards home ownership, towards forming families, towards feeling that they are a part of the American system and not just being exploited or left out or screwed over. If you can't get those reforms, you will get Mamdaniism, which is you will get them voting for far left, socialist, overtly Marxist mechanisms that basically, if they think I can't get what I feel entitled to, I will vote to give myself what I feel entitled to. And that might be far more sweeping than anything like a just normal property tax. They might get true wealth confiscation, true socialism on a whole bunch of mechanisms. And I think that would be catastrophic for America. And we can lower the odds of that catastrophe by not going down this particular populist impulse, I believe.
Well, Blake, it's always fascinating talking to you, and thank you very much for those insights. And good luck with your war in favor of tax and the American right.
But, don't say it! Oh, you're killing me. I'm not in favor. No,
I'm joking. I'm joking. Sorry, facetious ending. But we will let you go, and I hope we can get you back on at some point. It's been a great pleasure.
Of course. Thank you, Freddie.